Welcome to Three Principles Conversations with Christian McNeill, a series of conversations with Three Principles practitioners exploring a new explanation of how humans work. Insight into this understanding can help transform quality of life, relationships, and state of mind.
Okay, great. Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to anybody listening or viewing. And Richard Magee, a very warm welcome to you. Nice to see you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Richard is currently an American in Paris, and a friend, a co-explorer of the three principles, amongst other things. And Richard is also a sober member of a 12-step recovery group, a student of A Course in Miracles, a daily meditator using self-inquiry and shamatha practices. And he found the three principles through a friend, I think our mutual friend Bernie, and has since assimilated all of these practices into one. Richard says that the three principles has helped him know that there is only one truth. So anyway, lots to explore in there, Richard. And thank you very much for joining me today from Paris.
Sure. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So, let's leave all that stuff to one side for the moment, and hear a bit more about you, or something about you, Richard. Where do you hail from? What is your story, and how did you come to be on this spiritual journey?
Yeah, I guess. I think my spiritual journey. I, I often say that it started with my getting sober, but in looking at it, I think even my, many years of uh, delirious addiction was part of the path as well, right? I think.
So even before we get there, Richard, where did you grow up? What kind of a kid were you? What kind of a man did you become? What field were you in? Tell us a bit more about yourself, if that's okay.
All right, I'll start from the beginning, I guess. Um, yeah, I was adopted at 6 months old. My parents brought me home in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, was where I was born and adopted, and um, I grew up, with my mom and dad and sister who was blind, and they've the three of them have all passed away. We moved to Connecticut when I was 5 years old, so that's where I went through school and graduated high school, and I was always, you know, I think quiet and scared and in going through school. So I always tried to keep a low profile, and uh, I wasn't one of the popular kids, you know. But so at age 16, when I found alcohol, that all changed, and I suddenly had 10 friends, and it felt like, oh wow, this is the missing ingredient. And I in drinking in high school, and it very quickly became a daily thing. I guess it took a couple of years. At first it was just on weekends, and then by my senior year it became a daily thing to drink during our lunch hour. And yeah, it gave me that liquid courage. It allowed me to, what I felt like, let my inner being come out and express myself because I had been so scared and quiet my whole life that alcohol really seemed like it felt like I was letting my authentic self come out. I suppose if I even had that concept or wording back then, but anyway, and that continued through high school and college. My first AA meeting was at age 18.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. My mom had an alcoholic mother, so she was familiar with addiction. I mean, none of them found recovery, but I just remember my mom always waiting on the steps when I would come home drunk in high school and just give me a dose of shame and before I went to bed. So yeah, I kind of by my first year in college, I basically knew I was an alcoholic, but just chose not to do anything about it.
It sounds like you're describing, a phenomenon which I know is true for a lot of people with a drinking problem, that drinking was still the solution. So the idea of not drinking isn't that attractive.
Right, right. You know,
At that stage, of course, it changes. Yeah.
yeah. One little story I always talk about my first year in college. I somehow found that there was free psychotherapy sessions available to undergrad students, and I saw the word free, and you get 10 sessions for free, and I'm like, oh, okay, let's try this. So I signed up and went for my first psychotherapy session with a school psychologist, and immediately she started harping on my drinking because I was I belonged to I was pledging a fraternity and there was a lot of alcohol every day anyway. And I said to her, no, 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 I just came here to try to get better grades. Okay. Let's talk about how I'm going to get better grades. Not let's not talk about drinking. And of course she wouldn't let it up. She kept, coming back to that topic. And by the end of the first session, she said, okay, Richard, I want to put a limit on the number of drinks that you have per day, but you can give me the number. You give me a number and then you stick by it this week. And I was like, uh-oh, this is a trick question, because if I make that number too high, she'll think something, or if I make it too low, I won't be able to do it. So I came up with the lucky number 7. I said, okay, 7 drinks per day. And she said, okay, okay, 7, you're not allowed to go over that, and let me know next week when we meet how it goes. And so I started the week off, and I found it's really hard to stop at 7. So what I what I figured out to do was I had my 7 drinks, and then midnight would come, and then I could have my other 7 for the next day. So I could have 14 drinks that night, 7 and then midnight and then 7 more, and then I just wouldn't drink the next night, and that was okay. I could handle that. So I figured, I was very proud of myself. But then she, of course, started reducing the number on subsequent weeks, and then I wasn't able to follow that, so I ended up going to another AA meeting, but again, like I said, I really wasn't ready, and it wasn't until I had a couple drunk drivings and trouble with the law that I finally decided to go to rehab.
And what were you doing, Richard? What were you doing at that time? You said you were at college, and what presumably you'd now graduated from college, and what field were you in, and what was your life looking like then? Where were you living?
Yeah, I was working as a paralegal for law firms. This was the early '80s, and I had a job in New York City, and then I moved to Los Angeles, and both places uh, I had a job as a paralegal for law firms, and then from there I began working in technology and computer programming later on in my that actually started in sobriety, uh, but yeah, you know, when I found AA and through rehabs, I went to two or three rehabs. Um, part of that whole process is developing an understanding of God or a higher power, and I really think that that was the beginning of my spiritual exploration.
And
Uh,
had you had any kind of religious or spiritual leanings as a child or a student before you came into recovery?
Yeah, my parents went to the Methodist Church, United Methodist Church, and I went through confirmation, and I was active in the youth group there. So I did have an idea of God from that upbringing, um, and that and I think that the AA approach really opens up your ability to develop a new understanding of God, a new understanding of a higher power or whatever. And in that sense, I think this was the beginning of my spiritual exploration. But you're right; it started before that, and yeah. So yeah, I was able to create a understanding of a higher power that worked for me. That and trying to deal with, am I agnostic? Am I atheist? Or do I believe in God or what? And I, for quite a few years, went through all of that. Eventually, I'd say probably 10 years or so down that path, I found Buddhism, which was very helpful in just learning to sit still and work with my mind and see how see how busy it is all the time. um, and that was very, very helpful. And then Course in Miracles was an interesting path that I tried for a while. I started with just attending lectures of Marianne Williamson when she came to New York City, where I was living at the time.
Oh, interesting. I've met her. I met her in Edinburgh. Could you say a little more about the sort of overview of the Course in Miracles and Marianne Williamson's role? Because I don't think it's something we've touched on in this podcast before. So anybody tuning in might not know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the Course in Miracles is it was intended to be a self-study spiritual book. It's a thick book that was written in the '70s in New York City by it was believed to be channeled, but regardless, however it came to be, it's a very beautifully written spiritual book. Um, and it has 365 lessons in the back that you're supposed to go through. That's kind of a mind training, and each lesson for the day of the year is a one-page lesson with specific instructions on what to do. And I went through those, and I attended groups that, besides, lectures once in a while that I would go to. And it basically says that life is a dream, that what we think is reality is actually not, that everything in this world is just is a projection from our minds, and therefore it's like a dream, and the reality is something that we don't even fathom. It's invisible. It's call it a soul, call it whatever words you want to put onto it, but it's not what we think is reality.
There's an abiding a takeaway that I have from it. But in any so-called difficult situation, the mantra was, "I could choose peace instead of this," or "I could see peace instead of this." I mean, I know that's not the essence of it or the whole of it, but it's just something that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few wonderful concepts that the course offers that it divides, not divides, but it characterizes everything into either love or fear. That everything is either of love or of fear, and fear comes from separation, our belief that we're separate from God and separate from one another. And love is the opposite, which is knowing that we are one, and we are all one with the universe, with love. So and then it also says that anything of fear is really just a call for love. That when I'm in fear, that's my soul saying, I need to be in love, rather than in fear. And it's a beautiful path that I still pick up and read, and use a lot of the concepts that I remember that worked for me. And and then, since finding three principles and Ramana Maharshi most recently, I see similarities. I see things. Even in the 12 steps of AA, there are very common themes. It's all about working with our minds, putting aside our egos, which is a constant thing to do. I mean, we're just always working with this mind of ours. I think it feels like it's a tough nut to crack.
So you were into you found Buddhism. You were into you were into the Course in Miracles, and then at some point, you encountered the Three Principles, which is where you and I met initially online, and then later in Florida, where you lived at that time. But so tell me more about how that came about.
Well, I put down the Course in Miracles for quite some time. I actually, well, in full disclosure, I had a relapse, and started to drink again after 20 years of sobriety.
Can I? Would it be okay to ask a little bit about that, Richard?
Yeah.
Because I'm curious, because often in recovery circles, it's said is that the drink isn't the relapse. The drink's the symptom of the relapse. I don't know if you would agree with that, but the implication is that something has changed upstream of that, and that makes picking up a drink more likely. Would that have been true for you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It was, again, it was all in my mind. I was very depressed, at around year 18. And I just said to myself, and I didn't say it to any other person, which was probably part of the problem, that if I'm still this depressed at year 20, I'm out of here. And I basically made that come true. So I had these thoughts in my head, and they became true. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. Maybe it's something I needed. But yeah, I definitely had come to a place where what caused it, I don't know. I mean, my mind caused it, I know, but I was in this place. I just couldn't seem to get the help that I needed. I guess I needed help, and I wasn't able to receive it. I wasn't as connected to AA, and yeah, I just so yes, it was a relapse in the deeper sense as well. You're right. So yeah, so I put aside the 12, or I put aside the Course in Miracles, and when I came back to AA, of course, I went through the steps a few more times with various sponsors. I did always try to seek out, because I had started meditating and doing Zen Buddhism, and then Tibetan. So I do always seek out a sponsor who has a daily meditation practice. That is an important aspect of a sponsor in AA that I try to seek out. Um, and I do think that that's, working with the mind and working to quiet the mind is really always I feel what we're meant to do. And
It's interesting because one of the things I mean, we obviously have some shared history, including addiction and recovery, and prior to also at around that 20-year mark for me, that was when I ran across the principles. And I mean, I didn't relapse, but I had a different experience, which was that I was kind of, I'd been working very hard, very busy, on my recovery, and on my well-being, on my mental health, and it wasn't really delivering. Was the bottom line. I mean, that had been becoming clear to me for the previous 7 or 8 years. So quite a long time. And I had and my response to that was often, oh, I need to do something, add in another practice, do more meditation, do more journaling, do a reflective walk, do another inventory. And for me, the when I ran across the principles, and the big insights that I experienced right away were, first of all, that I am not broken, which was not a denial of my problems with alcohol, my passport, or anything like that. It wasn't that, but it was a recognition that I had been treating myself as a broken or damaged person who needed to work very hard to heal. And I just suddenly thought that this is nonsense. It's just nonsense. Really saw it, that that I am whole and complete, and I have an abnormal reaction to drink, but um, and also I saw that this endless kind of list of things, daily practices that I needed or I thought I needed to do, were not helping me. I just stopped them, like literally overnight. Now I don't not today. I occasionally do those things. I enjoy journaling, but I don't. It's not something that I have to do. I sometimes meditate when I move to, but I don't have a daily practice. And I'm not seeking one, and I have never felt more grounded and clear in my mind. So it's been a subtractive experience for me. And I think the thing that I learned was that it's not that I never have painful or difficult or thoughts of overwhelm, but I have a different relationship from them. I'm not bought into them to the same extent. So I think that's maybe a difference in how you and I are experiencing things. So I don't. In that, I can't. I know that I can't control what pops into my mind. The only um, sort of agency I have, if you like, is that I don't. As soon as I become aware of it, which my body, in terms of tightness, anxiety, but will alert me to, or my feelings will alert me to. I don't need to. I don't need to continue to entertain it. I can drop it more quickly. I can recognize what's going on. That emotional pain is a clue that I'm entertaining some kind of thought of overwhelm or hurt or resentment or whatever, and I can simply drop it. I'm not necessarily instantly walking on water at that point, but I'm not knitting into it in the way that I used to. I used to think that if I feel bad, it's a clue that something has happened to me and I need to get analytical or busy with the practices, and neither of those is part of my life today. I'm wondering what you make of, my experience and how that compares to your own, Richard.
Yeah, I think that there's this balance or a seesaw almost of that belief that I am perfect the way I am. There's nothing wrong with me. That even my desires are often underneath the desire of mine. There's a belief in lack, that I don't have that which I desire, and therefore, somehow lacking. And but yeah, the belief that I need to be fixed. There's something wrong with me. I need therapy. I need a new method to fix this. And then the spiritual or the spiritual solution that I feel is given to us even in AA, but also in other words, Course in Miracles, Buddhism, Three Principles, all of them are trying to tell us that no, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just your belief or your thought that there's something that needs to be fixed. Therefore, who you really are is love and light and perfection and so there are these two sides that I'm trying to reconcile, of course, with thought. and and I think this reconciliation is still going on because we're still part of this world, and I can see the two sides, and again, and then sometimes, like I need to dip into the Course in Miracles bag and say, well, do I choose peace? Because, and that's often what I'm learning to do, is just resign myself from the debating society, to quote a good quote from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, and it's interesting that raises a couple of things for me, Richard. Um that it, that prompt to dip into anything, and for me it can be anywhere. But before this, I was just doing a presentation, an early morning thing, and I'd come across an Einstein quote. It was just captured it. The one about the we ho- how our culture has made a god of the thinking mind, and really the intuitive mind is the where the power is to be found. And of course, I've completely bastardized that quote, but I'm sure you're familiar with it. But yes, and so that prompt to dip into whatever um, is seems to me to be a manifestation of our wisdom. This is the thing you need at the moment, or the inner voice. And I've come to really respect that. Really, so nothing's off the table here. It's not about you can't talk about anything but the three principles. Nothing could be further from the truth. And the other thing, just to finish the 2 points I was making, is that the thing that Sid Banks said, the founder of this work, the guy who had the original epiphany that spawned so many more and beyond, was that don't this is not there's nothing about this is giving up your faith or your spiritual life or whatever. We're really looking, and this seems true to me. We're really looking at the essential elements that are common to every um, faith and spiritual movement that well, are certainly based in love. So yeah. So and you were about to say something there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is only one truth, and but fortunately for us, there are all these different, uh, masters and gurus and teachers in the past, and that have said it different ways. Uh, that some of us walking around Earth need to hear, and maybe one teacher speaks to me and another one speaks to you, but there is such this commonality that I'm seeing the similarities between all these different paths, and seeing that the truth is in there. If I
Could it be? I mean, and this is would be how I would see it. And even though I've mentioned Sid Banks, he's very much not a guru. But could it be that um, the ultimate source is that the wisdom that comes through us? That because that's very
Yeah, well, it comes from within,
yeah.
but I feel we our minds want to grab onto something or learn and understand and intellectualize something. And maybe that's what we need to get inside.
So that I guess that where that so that comes to here's the rub, because that my sense is now that we don't. And while I respect um different writers and teachers, I can equally learn something from someone in a a checkout. They say something, and it's the recognition in me of the truth of that. And or and it's not just what comes from the outside, it's also what comes from the inside, a fresh thought that occurs to me, that is not come through anybody else. And I think that's been really massively important for me to it's part one of the things I always um try to show clients that I'm working with, is that you already have everything you need. And I'm not talking about, I'm making any judgment on their, financial or material circumstances, but that there is inbuilt a wellspring of wisdom and clarity and creativity. And we often don't give enough value and credence to that. And part of the coaching process when I work with clients is showing them the evidence of that and inviting them to give a little more space to what has already been showing up always, because people would not have got to where they've got to and still be alive if it hadn't been showing up. They've survived every challenge, every problem up until now. um and yeah, so I think that for me is one of the fundamental differences of the three principles, that and that the notion of being whole and complete is not just some verbiage, that it's a demonstrable truth, that you are an extraordinary powerhouse for creativity, fresh ideas, peace, love, connection, just unlimited resources within. Whether or not, every wise writing was wiped out tomorrow or not, every teacher was eliminated from the libraries of life, that would still be present in both you and I and everyone else.
Yeah, I guess whatever whatever shows us what we need to see to get there, whether that comes in the form of of a teacher or a practice or a guru or whatever it may be from our outside world to see that, to go inward, and that's also why I really have enjoyed learning uh, about Ramana Maharshi and doing the practice of self inquiry has also, similar to what Three Principles has shown me, is to look within, um, and an important uh, thing I've learned there is that my problems, well, with Three Principles, I really saw how, oh, the thought is kind of that piece that has been the root of everything in my life, good and bad. That I definitely saw, thanks to Sid Banks and all of you 3P community people, that thought is that missing link, as they call it, the piece that has caused all that is what I thought was good and all that I thought was bad, and it even.
And to be clear, just because the word thought probably for anyone listening has a particular connotation of what you're thinking. The sort of literally words that aren't spoken out loud. But when we talk about thought, we're talking about everything, all the processing, all the conditioning, all the beliefs and values and ideas
And even subconscious thought too, so
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. You're not always aware of what
which is
we're.
often the trickiest.
But you were saying thought that you recognize that thought was the missing link.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a common Three Principles uh, saying too, but it's true that I think that was very helpful for me to see that it all can be traced back to a thought that I had, and anyway, but then what to do with that is where I've struggled, and I know I've struggled that with various uh, 3P people in wanting, well, what do I do? Give me a how-to manual, give me instructions, give me a procedure, and I know that all 3P in general just does not give that. Uh, and, and much to my chagrin, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Even Buddhism has a path and very explicit uh, things to do, which I guess my ego likes and wants. And one of my 3P mentors said, "Oh, you want something to you want to know what to do? I'll tell you what to do. Undo everything,"
Yeah, I have a
which
slight. I
is
mean,
valid.
I find some of that kind of mystical stuff not so helpful, but the one of the things that has become very clear to me is um, that the more I can become tolerant and even comfortable with uncertainty, the more richness will come into my life. And I think that's one of that's kind of a different way of talking about some of what you're saying. And it's not uncertain. It's not like embracing pain for the sake of pain or anything like that. But I think before I encountered this one, I wanted to be certain. I wanted to know answers. I wanted to be in control, if you like. And what I've come to see is that can really get in the way of something fresh and new and different. And the more I have practiced just being okay with, I don't know what to do about this situation at the moment, or this person, or this challenge in my work or whatever, the more I can get comfortable with that is actually an incredibly powerful place to be. That creates space for something completely new and fresh and different. And the more that I demand certainty, I'm almost certainly revisiting something that hasn't been that successful in the past. So the cost of this temporary comfort of certainty is, a lack of evolution, a lack of growth, a lack of creativity. And then what happens with that is that over time the evidence mounts up in my own life. There's situation after situation after situation that I didn't know how to deal with initially, and then something occurred to me. And sometimes something phenomenal occurred to me that really changed everything. So today I am comfortable with uncertainty most of the time when it occurs.
Well, I guess the most important thing I'm practicing now from the Ramana Maharshi teachings I'm reading is that our problems aren't from thought, but they're from our identification to that thought.
Lovely, lovely. Which is very much our three principles, kind of take as well. That you are not your thinking. Thinking is a stream that runs through you constantly, and but it's not you.
But it's because I think that I'm my thoughts. I think that I am fill in the blank. I am my body. I am my mind. That identification is what causes our struggle and pain and confusion. And another thing that I always go back to is when in doubt, quiet the mind. And that's another one of Ramana Maharshi's teachings is just quiet the mind at all times. And, and which makes sense if it all seems to point to thought. Well, let's just turn off thought as best we can.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think the, there's some overlap there of that in uh, in the quiet mind is often where we find our solutions. Although it has been my experience that insight can arise anywhere, that we don't there is no requirement to, insight is not dependent on a practice, and I think as people in recovery, we've probably heard more stories than most of people who have a moment of clarity when they are in extremis, you know, so I think it's useful to note that this facility, this possibility of a life changing or even a tiny insight is always is always in potential. It's always Richard. I'm conscious of time. I'm very grateful to you for your time today, and I'm thinking that we're probably coming to the end of our allocated time, and I'm wondering if that's just a place to leave it.
Yeah, no,
Unless there's anything that you really want to add to our conversation, which I've really enjoyed. Thank you.
yeah, no, I've enjoyed it too. I mean, talking about the mind is always tricky because, like I said earlier, it is a tough nut to crack. And as soon as you start, as soon as you start talking about it, it the mind will wiggle and squirm and come up with a tangent because that's what the mind does.
And yet, there's something underneath that. It seems to me an invisible power, a less visible power that we can discern that from how we're feeling and how life is playing out. We can discern that.
Well, and what I was, the 3P teaching, or what I've heard a lot from 3P people is to understand the nature of mind, and I think that's in line with all the other practices that I've mentioned too. And they say it in different ways, but it is just this inward introspection, self inquiry that I think is what's been helping me and what I got from three principles, which I think is so valuable.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And good to see you. And I really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for having me.